Today is Wednesday, April 20th, 2022. I'm a Friday girl. I don't typically publish podcast episodes on Wednesdays, but I have a good reason to publish one today. According to a Time magazine article, both marijuana smokers and non-smokers agree that April 20th, or 420, is recognized as a national holiday for cannabis culture. In honor of 420, today's episode is an interview with Leah Sera, PharmD. She's the program director of the Master of Science degree in Cannabis Science and Therapeutics at the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy. It's the only Master of Science program in the United States devoted to the comprehensive and holistic study of cannabis science. If you want to hear about the program and how Dr. Sera uses her voice as an educator, you're in the right place. Enjoy. Now, if you're new to the Pharmacist Voice podcast, welcome. I'm your host, Kim Newlove. I'm a pharmacist by training, but I made a career transition to voice actor and podcast host. Among other things, I narrate audiobooks for women pharmacist authors, provide medical narration to clients in the pharmaceutical and biotech industries, and narrate content for explainer videos and e-learning projects. I was inspired by my nonverbal son, Craig, who has autism, to combine my background as a pharmacist with my speaking voice and launch my voiceover business, The Pharmacist Voice, in 2017. Craig helped me realize the power of having a voice and using it. My solo podcast episodes are about some aspect of being a pharmacist, a voice actor, a pharmacist podcaster, or my career transition from pharmacist to voice actor and podcast host. My interview shows feature a variety of people who use their voices to advocate for something, educate in some way, or entertain so that you are inspired to use your voice too. This is episode 145, and you can find the show notes with links to anything mentioned today, like that Time magazine article I already mentioned and Dr. Leah Sera's full bio, on my website, thepharmacistvoice.com. You can also find my medical narration demo and a link to my online course, which is called Pronounce Drug Names Like a Pro, on my website. That website again is thepharmacistvoice.com. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Dr. Leah Sera. Hi, Leah. Welcome to the Pharmacist Voice podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. It's exciting to have you here to talk about medicinal cannabis science and therapeutics here on the Pharmacist Voice podcast. I've never had anybody talk about this topic before.
Well, great. I'm happy to be the first.
Awesome. All right. Well, can you tell me a little bit about the program that you are the director of or co-director of, and how the program got started?
Sure. So I am the co-director of the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy's MS in Medical Cannabis Science and Therapeutics. This is a 2-year, 30-credit Master of Science program. It's primarily online, and this started in fall of 2019. So it's relatively recent, but we've got a few years under our belt.
Very good. And who came up with the idea for this program? It certainly seems unique. I think I read on the website that it's the only graduate program for medicinal cannabis in the United States. How did
Yes.
you come up with it?
We're the only master's program entirely devoted to, the comprehensive and holistic study of cannabis science. This was the idea initially of our dean, Natalie Eddington at the School of Pharmacy. And the first that I heard about this was back in 2017. The dean announced that she was interested in developing this graduate program in medical cannabis. And I thought that this was really interesting. My clinical background is in palliative care, so I had some knowledge and an experience with patients asking about medical cannabis or being interested in using cannabis for symptoms. And I thought it would just be great if I was able to get involved in the program in some way, maybe like teach a course in the program. So I asked my department chair to put in a good word to the dean for me. And then when I met with the dean and shared some of my ideas about what this program might look like, she asked me to actually spearhead the development of the proposal and and then luckily when it was approved, then the implementation and asked me to be director of the program. So it's been a very organic, development of my involvement with the program. And it's just been a really wonderful challenge, probably the biggest and most interesting challenge in my career so far.
It certainly is a unique field of study. It's not something that's really in the formal education of most pharmacists. Yeah, well, congratulations on your co director status. That's quite an achievement. And do you also teach in the program as well?
Yes, I teach several courses in the program. I teach the program's first course, which is a history of medical cannabis, sort of a survey course and introduction to the program and the history of cannabis policy in the United States and around the world. I also teach a foundational clinical course which introduces students to the concept of evidence-based medicine and how you would apply that to cannabis science. And then I also teach in our 2 capstone courses.
Wow, you're busy.
Yes, I am.
Oh, good for you. You mentioned that when you proposed involvement in this program, you said that you had a background in palliative care. Can you tell me a little bit about your why? Why palliative care? Why are you interested in the use of medicinal cannabis? Why are you interested in teaching? Can you help boil that down for me?
There's a lot of questions wrapped up in that one question. So I'll start first with why palliative care. I knew from when I was a pharmacy student and first introduced to palliative care as a clinical specialty that was where I wanted to put my efforts. The thing I liked about palliative care was you really use not just your pharmaceutical knowledge and expertise, but also your human qualities to connect with people in very challenging circumstances. And you work with a lot of different health professionals and other people to try and improve the lives of patients. And so I was really drawn to that kind of holistic view of medicine. And back to my rotations in my residency in 2010 and 2011, I was, even though that was a long time ago, medical cannabis wasn't yet legal in Maryland, I was still having questions from patients about what is this something that can be used? Is it right for me? And so I had always kind of been hearing about cannabis, although I didn't start getting nearly as involved in understanding the science as I did when I started developing this program.
Do you have any success stories of a patient that you've worked with using medicinal cannabis in palliative care?
Well, I'm not. So my role as a pharmacist was always more education when it did come up, and I've never been a cannabis clinician myself. So I don't have a cannabis. My clinical practice right now isn't directly related to medical cannabis, and so it still is related to education. If it comes up in my current clinic, which is a transitions of care clinic, I'm able to educate patients about the science and about our program here in Maryland. But I don't certify patients for medical cannabis or recommend medical cannabis for individual patients as part of my practice.
Okay. Well, that gives me a little bit more of an idea of your background and where you come from. Did you go right from, I guess, your PharmD program into teaching and working in a clinical setting? Or what's your background there? Because I'm kind of curious about your why for the teaching.
Oh, so sure. For teaching, I did always also, even, before I decided to go to pharmacy school, I had assumed that I would be a teacher. When I decided to go to pharmacy school, I did do 2 years of residency. So I did, a year of general practice residency in a community hospital and came back to the University of Maryland, which is also where I finished. I did my PharmD degree at University of Maryland, came back to University of Maryland to do my palliative care residency. And then as soon as I finished that, I went into teaching. So I knew that I did always know that I wanted to be involved in teaching. And I also knew, that I wanted to come back to the University of Maryland because I just am really devoted to this school and to its programs and its students. And I still, now I've been teaching here for 10 years, and I love teaching. I like to be around students and their ideas, and I think there's always a lot of exciting things that happen on a college campus. So I still love it.
Oh, good. And I bet you love to learn too.
Yes, yeah, I absolutely always feel like there's more to learn.
So, how did you become an expert on medical cannabis science and therapeutics when it's not taught in a PharmD program?
I think as like a lot of us that have come into this field, was primarily self-taught. As you said, I didn't get this formal education in my pharmacy school curriculum. Now we actually, since we started this program, we have 2 electives in our PharmD program, so that students who are interested in this can get some of that formalized education before they graduate with their PharmD. So we're, trying to change that as well. But I think, like most people, I've been, primarily self-taught.
Hey, that works too. I think that's great. And I love that because you have this master's program, you can then include it in the PharmD program. I think that's amazing.
Yes, and we just this year have opened up the option for our PharmD students to do a dual degree, so they can start, in the course of doing their PharmD degree, they can also start the master's program usually in their 3rd year. All the courses that they take in the master's program will count as elective credits toward their PharmD, and so they can graduate with both degrees, at the end of their 4th year of pharmacy school.
Ooh, that's cool. I've heard of dual pharmacogenomics master's programs and PharmD programs at the same time. I guess just one at Manchester University College of Pharmacy there in Fort Wayne. And I've heard of many programs graduating PharmD MBAs, but this is something new. I think that's pretty cool when you can do a dual degree and it doesn't take additional time. You can get out in 6 years. Would that be right?
They can get out in 4 years. So as long as they start, because our program is a 2-year program and they do it concurrently with the PharmD. Oh, so do you mean from start to finish? So,
Yes.
right. So ours, so students, ours is just a 4-year program, our PharmD. So students can come to us. They don't need a bachelor's degree. So yes, they can come to us with 2 years of prerequisites, or with a 4-year degree. But our school is, our PharmD is not the combined 6-year program.
Okay. Now, is it only pharmacy students who get this master's degree in medicinal cannabis science and therapeutics?
No, it's open to all interested, all interested parties. We do have pharmacists and other clinicians, physicians, nurses, physical therapists who are in our program. They constitute about a third of our cohort. We also have students who with a background in basic sciences like chemistry and microbiology, but really about half of our students don't have a science or clinical background. We have attorneys, we have public health professionals, we have patient advocates and people with a humanities background. We have a lot of entrepreneurs and business professionals that are in our program. So it's really diverse in terms of the academic and professional experience that our students come into the program with.
That's good to have diversity because everybody wants to know something different. And I think that helps each person from different disciplines understand one another when those questions are proposed. And you did say that it's mostly online at this point. Is that right?
Yes, the program is primarily online. We do require that students come to our campus in Rockville, Maryland, once a semester for in-person symposium. Obviously, in the last couple of years, we've had to make some changes to that. But hopefully now we're kind of back on track with that. And it's been the times that we've been able to gather in person, it's been a really valuable experience for them to connect with their classmates who they wouldn't normally see because all of the regular coursework is online, and also to connect with professionals in the field and seminars and networking sessions. Because we also think that's a really important part of our program is, this networking with professionals and getting ready to graduate and start a new career in cannabis, or, to enhance their current career.
What's the eligibility criteria for the program? I know you said it's offered in Maryland. It's not a state-specific degree, right?
No, we have students all over the country, and we have international students as well. The only hard and fast requirement is a bachelor's degree or higher, because this is a graduate degree. But other than that, we don't have prerequisites. Right? We don't require prerequisite courses. Everything that we want the students to know in terms of the chemistry, the pharmacology, we really teach that from the ground up in all of our courses.
Well, that gives me a better idea of who your students are and how they interact and all that good stuff. But I'm going to hit you with a hard question now. What is the goal of the program? I mean, what problem does the degree that they earn solve? Like, who are you trying to help with this degree?
This degree really has the same focus as all the degrees at our School of Pharmacy, which is to optimize patient care and the experience of the patient. So, patients are at the center of our program, certainly, and whether someone's goal is to improve patient care, directly by working with patients directly, or by helping to improve access by crafting, good policy, locally, regionally, federally, or by, working, in, a lab doing research or quality, making sure that, the products are good quality, developing new formulations. Those are all things that ultimately improve care for patients. And so I would say that is what is at the heart of our program.
I love that answer. There's a lot of, I don't know how to call it in a nice way. There's a lot of controversy surrounding medicinal cannabis. Some people are for it, some people are against it. Some states allow it, some people don't. Some states have recreational use, some don't. But what you talked about, helping the patient, that's what I think we should all just remember. We're all just trying to help people.
Absolutely.
Leah, let's shift gears a little bit here. Let's talk about how the degree is marketed or advertised to potential students. What are the selling points?
I think that one of the main selling points is its uniqueness. That this is the only master's program that is, as I said, devoted to the study of medical cannabis. The other selling points of the program, I think, are the flexibility in, that most of the coursework is online and asynchronous, meaning that students don't have to log on at any specific time, of the day or the week. There's a lot of flexibility with when, they can turn in assignments. And really, most of our students are not full-time students. Most of our students are working professionals. And so I think there's a lot of flexibility to complete this degree, even, with an already busy schedule. Whether it's, work, another profession, or parenting, or, everyone has so much going on. And most people have been able to, really do a great job fitting in this program to all the things that they're already doing.
Oh, that's good to hear. Life is complicated, especially you mentioned work and family. We all have these things, our choices in life, and they're not neither good nor bad for everybody else. It's just our choices. And it's nice to hear that your program can be flexible and work with so many people's diverse needs. Now, when somebody graduates with this degree, what can they do with it?
That's definitely the question that we get the most. And the answer is a lot. There isn't a direct line, when you think of pharmacy school, for instance, there are, someone gets a PharmD degree and then there's a few main branches and maybe a couple of offshoots, but most people are going to go into, hospital or community pharmacy or, and so here, because we have so many different students coming in with so many different backgrounds and academic goals, they're all going back out into those different areas. So we have clinicians who are, going back out into their clinical practice, but maybe want to expand and start to see patients and certify patients for medical cannabis. Or they want to, they want to go and become educators themselves. We're big proponents in our program, and we're always talking to students about paying it forward. In fact, so much so that we actually include instructional design as a part of our program, and they do a major project developing, cannabis educational materials, medical cannabis educational materials for an outside organization because we know how much of a need this is. We want our students to graduate and then go out and to fulfill that need. And many of them are, whether it's, formally like we do in a university environment or, just educating patients, educating community. So that's very important. And we have students, as I mentioned, a lot of entrepreneurs who have gone out to start new businesses. And we have students as well who've used this as a stepping stone to get into kind of the more traditional industry that you think of with medical cannabis in terms of dispensaries, and quality assurance and analytical testing and things like that.
Speaking of stepping stones, has any of your graduates ever used the master's degree in medicinal cannabis science and therapeutics as a stepping stone to a PhD?
We do have students who have gone on, we just graduated our first cohort last May. So,
Congrats.
students, thank you, are still, we do have students who have gone on to do further degrees, either, PhDs or other master's degrees in various fields, in pharmacology, in business, in psychology. So again, our students have so many different goals. But we feel like this, as you said, is a good stepping stone to help them, reach goals that they've already set or identify new goals for themselves professionally.
Now, I know that there's a clear path to getting this graduate degree, but along the line, unfortunately, sometimes people draw their own conclusions. There's probably some myths or misconceptions about this degree. So, what are some myths and misconceptions about the Master of Science degree in medicinal cannabis science and therapeutics?
I think the biggest point that I would want to make is that even though we're a school of pharmacy and we're teaching this program out of the school of pharmacy, this degree is not equivalent to a PharmD, and it doesn't prepare students to be licensed as a pharmacist or any other healthcare professional. So if they wanted to practice as a pharmacist, a nurse practitioner, a PA, a physician, then they would have to go those other routes. Our program does not prepare students to, for licensure in any of these medical fields.
Has a student ever reached out to explore attending your program and they want to do something that you say, oh, no, we don't do that here?
Well, I think, as I said, that's probably, the question that I've gotten the most, where I've had to say that no, this program doesn't make you a pharmacist. But we have had, we did have one student from our previous cohort that did graduate from our program and then start pharmacy school. So, students that, really that don't come in as clinicians, and really want to be licensed to provide direct, patient care as a clinician, then we advise them on, other, paths that they can take, after, graduating from our program.
We talked a lot about students and who's eligible and stuff like that, but what's in the program anyway? Can you tell me a little bit about, you said 2 years, 30 credit hours? What's in there?
So there are 5 required courses, 5 required 3-credit courses. The first 4 courses are, as I mentioned, that kind of survey, history of cannabis, history, culture, and policy. That's the first course. And then we also have foundational courses in pharmacology, in cannabinoid chemistry, and the introduction to the introductional clinical course, which focuses on evidence-based medicine, which I mentioned earlier as well. Those are the first 4, we call them our foundational courses. And we also have a required course on the negative effects of cannabis. And then students are able to choose 4 electives out of the electives that we offer to more customize their kind of route through the program. So we have electives that focus on things like advocacy, or law. Advanced clinical electives that do like a much deeper dive into the evidence and to therapeutics, and we have some courses that do a deeper dive into things like analytical testing methodologies and the botany of the plant and things like that.
That sounds very different from pharmacy school, for sure. That's a lot of credit hours to fill up with all those electives and core courses, too. It sounds like a very interesting program. I do love to learn, so that does sound interesting. I've never been truly interested in medicinal cannabis, but you do make it sound interesting, I must say. Now, when I went to pharmacy school and when you went to pharmacy school, we had all these basic things that we learned about, right? Dosing, product selection, drug interactions, lab interaction facts, adverse drug effects, drug metabolism, all these things. Is that something that your students learn in the master's program?
We do address all those things in various courses in the master's program. And one of the things that we, in the development process, when we're thinking, okay, how are we going to create 30 credit program that's just focused on one drug? Because you think, okay, well, in 4 years of pharmacy school, we learned about hundreds, thousands of medications, right? So what we did was we really rolled a lot of basic education and training into especially the foundational courses. So in our pharmacology course, we're teaching students who may not have taken a science course since high school. We're teaching them about things like pharmacokinetics, about the basics of how drugs work in the body, and then we apply all of that basic information to the cannabis plant. And so, of course, for some students who are already clinicians or already pharmacists, some of this may be a bit of a review, and for others who have other specialties, other courses or content may be a bit of a review. But we've really tried to make the program accessible to all, while still being challenging for those who are already experts. But yes, in the different courses, we do address things like drug interactions, and all of the other kind of pertinent drug information that you would expect to learn about cannabis in a program like this.
Oh, you're giving me a much better idea of what's in the program. That was a great description. I'm thinking about the attorneys in this program because if they don't have any sort of a science background and they're learning about this, I just wonder how steep that learning curve is. Do they ever have a problem with it, these non medical folks?
We, as I said, probably half of our students have, no clinical, or science background, specific science background. And so while yes, it can be a steep learning curve, the students are successful. We're able to successfully, shepherd the students through the courses. And as I said, we really, our science faculty are excellent at, taking this really back to basics and then building, in each module and to then apply this to cannabis. And so, in the foundational courses, the required courses, we really focus on, okay, what's the basic information about the cannabis plant, about how cannabis can be used, clinically, about how it works in the body, that we think everybody, regardless of what field they're going to be ending up in, should know in order to, really advocate, for the safe and effective use of this medicine. And so that's what we put. And then again, those students who are interested in a deeper dive into the clinical topics and therapeutics, or science and chemistry and things like that, can take the more advanced elective courses that will provide them with that more challenging content.
And I bet all of those non-clinical students have a much better appreciation for pharmacists and what medical people do.
Well, I hope so. I think they're all, they all really value, understanding. And as I said, our science faculty are excellent in that they're able to really provide that education on kind of a continuum where, those who don't have any science background find um, even though a lot of students, I would say, are scared of, the pharmacology and the chemistry course if they've never seen it before, everybody gets through it. I haven't had anybody, come to me and say, the program, the science is too hard. I can't do this program. I mean, people get through the program, and then hopefully our goal is certainly to provide those people for whom it's review with enough challenging and interesting content as well that they don't feel like everything is review.
Mhm. Now, as pharmacists, there's one thing that we do when we don't know the answer, and I'm sure that you equip your students with this same skill. You look it up, right?
Absolutely.
Yes. So, can you tell me one or two resources or references that your students use often?
So our one of our entire courses, our entire introduction to, clinical topics in cannabis is focused on on evidence-based medicine, how to read, and understand the medical literature, which is so important, especially in cannabis, when cannabis medicine, because there are really no guidelines for use or accepted best practices. So you're really having to read studies and figure out how they apply to particular situations or particular patients. And so we dedicate an entire course on that skill. And so, I think that, going to, even, PubMed there's many free, articles on PubMed. And so, we, teach our students, how to do a literature search, based on how to develop a research question so that you can, really search the literature quickly, efficiently, for the information that you need. Because, unlike, if we were looking up, atenolol or something, you just go to, Lexicomp or Micromedics, and you find all the information there. That doesn't really exist for cannabis. So, it's harder to just go and look up those resources, but you can distill a lot of information from the literature. And there's a great systematic review if you're really interested in cannabis, want to kind of get a big picture. There is a systematic review that was initially published in 2017, and then it's been updated since then by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. That was really exhaustive of all of the literature that had been published, all of the studies that had been published on cannabis up to that point, and like every therapeutic indication, and kind of distilled it down. So if someone was really interested in, kind of a general overview, I think that which is freely available, that systematic review, and I can send you the link to that as well. If you wanted to post it, is a really good place to start. And it was actually a place that we started when we were developing our curriculum and the program as well.
Resources and references are so important, and knowing fake news from something that's legit is really important too. I'm so happy that you teach that in your class. I think that's very important. Now, even though you've done a great job of telling me what's in the curriculum and what the students are learning, I'm also curious what's not in the curriculum.
Yes, that's a really good question. The primary thing that's not in our curriculum is any hands-on interaction with the cannabis plant. It's something that we're not allowed to provide that experience at this point because of the federal legal status of cannabis. We also don't provide any training or education on the cultivation of the cannabis plant. Because we're not a school of agriculture, so that's not where our expertise is. As a pharmacy school, our expertise is really in the therapeutics, the health policy, and of course the pharmaceutical sciences. And so that's really where we've focused our efforts in terms of developing our curriculum.
Oh, thank you for sharing what's in the curriculum and what's not in the curriculum.
You're welcome.
Leah, can you tell me, how is your master's degree program different from certificate training programs? For example, I've heard there's one offered by the International Society of Cannabis Pharmacists.
I think the biggest difference between a certificate program and our program is that our program leads to a Master of Science degree. It's very comprehensive program, and it involves many different areas of study about the cannabis plant. And our program offers opportunities, things like networking, this live personal interaction with other students who are who are as passionate about medical cannabis as you are. And also our program, as I talked about earlier, is really diverse in that it's not just for healthcare professionals. It's for anyone who has a real interest in learning more about the cannabis plant and advancing this field.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. I know there's some people who, for whatever reason, they feel like they don't want a formal program. They just want to do a certificate. They know that they have options and now they understand how yours is different. And I think just from where I'm sitting, I see one of the benefits of your program as being that stepping stone to something else, maybe a PhD in pharmacology, like you mentioned earlier, or an MBA or something like that, something that would just be the next step down the line.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Now, speaking of students not being able to afford a program or maybe not even having time, even though yours is flexible, like you explained, what if people feel that they can't afford the time or the money to join your program? What are some self study resources that you might recommend?
So I'll answer this in two parts. First, I'll say that there are organizations, professional organizations that are devoted to medical cannabis advocacy. One, that you already mentioned, and then there's also the Society of Cannabis Clinicians, which is very active, and there's also the International Cannabis Research Society. So those are kind of two different aspects of cannabis science, where I would encourage, regardless of whether or not you're able or interested in doing a master's program, to look up those, professional societies because they have a lot of good information and resources. But I do want to also follow up and say that students can get financial aid. I know that, so that is something that our students are eligible for, and that many of our students do take advantage of financial aid options and opportunities at our school.
Now, what if a student needed to stretch the program over 3 years instead of two? Is that an option?
The program, so students do, life happens, students need to take a break from the program. And so there is some flexibility. Students have 5 years in total, from the time that they enroll to complete the credits, to complete the coursework, before they would have to, reapply to the school. So there is some flexibility. But we do, of course, we try to keep students, as much on track to complete the program in 2 years as possible. But, there are plenty of students who do take a leave of absence because, as I said, life happens and sometimes there's things that are more important than school, and we understand that.
So that's good to know because Once somebody graduates with their bachelor's degree, I mean, what happens? A lot of times they want to move on with their life. They do want grad school, but they also want a job and to find their equal partner and possibly to have children. And it's that time in their life, age 22 to 30, where sometimes these things are happening. So I just thought I'd throw that out there for anyone considering this program who's in the thick of their life and not really sure if they can afford the time. But if you can do it in 2 years, great, but it's nice to know there's some flexibility there if they need to prolong it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, as I said, we do have students who, we certainly encourage students to take advantage of that option rather than just, leaving the program altogether if things become too challenging.
Now, when somebody does graduate from your program, science moves on, right? There are changes in the science, policies change, therapeutic uses change. So, what do you recommend for your students to do upon graduation, after graduation, to keep up with what's going on with medicinal cannabis?
Absolutely. And, I think that, because we're a school of pharmacy, this is something that, as pharmacists, we're really, keyed in on this because, this is something that we do in our profession all the time. So what I suggest to students, which I do personally, is I try to make the information come to me. Rather than having to go and constantly search for the information. So one of the things that I do is I go to a PubMed and I have a keyword search that, PubMed will email me any articles that have, the keywords medical cannabis, or however I've set it up. So those emails will come to me and then I can review any new publications. And also, these professional societies will often have newsletters, so you can sign up for newsletters. But I always suggest, in my program, and in my, in the PharmD program as well, that it's always best if you can set it up so that the information comes to you automatically rather than you having to go search it out.
That is brilliant. I love that. That is brilliant. I will have to use that strategy for myself. I love it. That's great.
I learned that in pharmacy school. And it served me well, not just for medical cannabis, but for all things related to pharmacy.
Yeah, and you brought up also something that I think pharmacists are familiar with, like joining organizations or societies upon graduation, and you can get that information sent to you, monthly newsletters, etc. Can you just review? I know you mentioned earlier some societies that are connected to medical cannabis, but can you recommend any for, current or prospective or graduate students who are in the medical cannabis space?
So there's the Society of Cannabis Clinicians and the International Cannabinoid Research Society. Those are two big ones that are very active, both online, and in terms of, I know that the ICRS hosts at least one major international conference every year. So I think that those, would certainly be two that would be worth, a look on their website and potentially joining. We also have an organization within our program, a student organization that's the Medical Cannabis Student Association, that is very active in terms of putting on journal clubs and inviting guest speakers and advocating for cannabis and kind of engaging with each other. So and that is open to students and to alumni as well. So they're really creating a great community at our school.
Communities are great. That's great that you mentioned all those societies. Thank you for doing that. And then you mentioned something that made my ears perk up again, conferences. I didn't realize that there are medical cannabis conferences or anything like that. What do you know about those?
So there are a number of them. There's there are two big cannabis science conferences. There's Cannabis Science Conference West, which is held in California, and Cannabis Science Conference East, which is held here in Baltimore. And so those are typically quite large events, and well attended. We had a booth and a talk at the one here in Baltimore last September, but yeah, there are definitely cannabis science conferences that are hosted, not just in our country, but internationally as well.
Wow, I had no idea. This is very much not my jam, so I don't know about this. But conferences I love. I love to learn, so of course resources are great. And then are there any textbooks out there for anybody who I know this is an old school question, but in case anybody wants to learn about it, if there's a medical library near them and they can, any listener wants to check this out, are there such things as medical textbooks about medical cannabis science?
And there have been a lot of books and articles that have been written about cannabis science, and there are a few that we do use in our program. Cannabis Pharmacy is one of them, and I can also I'm happy to forward you the links to those. The Cannabis Clinician is another one that we've referenced. A lot of the content, we really in our program, we we create our own content in terms of distilling information from the primary literature and creating our own lectures and presentations and things like that, and we also curate a lot of material, both medical literature and from these already published books as well. So we do try to keep abreast of what's being published and try to incorporate that when we can into the program.
I had no idea there were textbooks or, formal references out there about this. And I tell you, I try not to over prepare for my interviews because I like surprises, and that's a nice surprise. I love books. So to hear that there are textbooks and formal references out there not only helps my listeners to understand what's out there and the scope of what's covered, but it also helps me understand. That's cool. Now, as we start to wrap this up, I want to ask you, what do you think the future holds for medical cannabis science and therapeutics?
Well, I think that there's going to be, there's going to continue to be a lot of evolution and advancement in cannabis science because there's just a huge amount of interest. And I think we're starting to be able to do more research in this country. Cannabis research has been very limited for a number of reasons in the U.S., of course, because it's still a Schedule One drug, which really limits, it makes it very difficult to research it. And of course, there's still a stigma that, has a lot to do with that. But still, research is happening. It's opening up even in the US. There's a lot of research going on in other parts of the world. And so I think that, we're going to see, a lot more research and a lot more public acceptance of cannabis as medicine. And that's really what we try to, what we hope that one of the things our program will do, maybe as a byproduct, is to really legitimize this plant is medicine. So I think that, even though there is still a stigma associated, I think that, the public, as a whole, is starting to, kind of change its views on cannabis and as particularly, cannabis in that it can be used as a medical treatment.
Right. And helping people is what it's all about.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Dr. Leah Sera, for talking with me today on the Pharmacist Voice podcast about the Master of Science degree in Medical Cannabis Science and Therapeutics. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
No, I think this was a great talk. I really enjoyed having this conversation.
Very good. And I'll put links in the show notes to anything that she mentioned. And thanks again for being with me today and sharing how you use your voice as a pharmacist in the medical cannabis science and therapeutics area. Take care.
Thanks so much. You too.
Thank you for listening to episode 145 of the Pharmacist Voice podcast. Please visit thepharmacistvoice.com to read the show notes. In the show notes today, I'll have links to Dr. Leah Sera's LinkedIn profile, the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy's Master of Science degree in Medical Cannabis Science and Therapeutics, and more. If you know someone who would like this episode or needs to hear it, please share it with them. And subscribe to or follow the Pharmacist Voice podcast on your favorite podcast player and YouTube to get each new episode right when it comes out. Thank you again for listening.